Hey guys, and welcome to episode 144 of the OCD Stories.com podcast. Now, in this episode, it's a little different. The guest is Chrissie Hodges, which I'm sure many of you will not need me to introduce. For those that aren't familiar with Chrissie, she focuses a lot on sort of the term Pure OCD and the themes that come with that. She does a lot on YouTube and on Facebook. And I have done, I think, 3 episodes of her before, so I encourage you to go check that out. I enjoy chatting with Chrissie, but this time it's a little different, and this is why. I asked Jess, who's someone who's helped me out on the podcast. I value her opinion. I like her approach. She has OCD, and I wanted to give her the opportunity to interview Chrissie because I think it'd be nice for her. But also I think it'd be good for you guys because I knew she liked Chrissie's work and I knew she would come with a whole fresh perspective than I would if I was interviewing Chrissie again. And I knew she'd have some real exciting and interesting questions, which she does. And I'm not gonna go over, as I usually do, the topic of this episode, but I want you to know they cover many areas, wide-ranging. I was in the room while they were recording it, and it was fascinating. And I think they both had good rapport. So I think you're going to really enjoy this. Before we get into it, if you have been enjoying the podcast and it's helped you in any way, if you get time, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. It will deeply help me and the podcast, and I appreciate it. So thank you to Jess for doing this. I appreciate it, and for Chrissie for giving up her time too. And I'm excited to share this with you. So without further ado, here is Chrissie Hodges and Jess as the interviewer.
So I guess you've been on the OCD Stories podcast before, so people can definitely go check out that episode to get kind of your story and detail and stuff from there. Is there anything kind of since then in terms of like your recovery journey that you could kind of give us an update on?
Oh my. Well, I mean, the recovery journey is ongoing.
Yes, agreed.
And I think that probably most recently in regards to OCD, I consider myself in symptom management or symptom recovery and emotional recovery, meaning I've really gone through a lot of reflection and being able to meet myself where the emotional piece of OCD is, which oftentimes doesn't get addressed. I know I've talked about this on OCD Stories before, but just the grief involved of living with OCD. And while I have done a ton of work on that in the last few years, I also have only recently discovered some uncovered trauma that I went through, not only just in my own personal journey as a person and a human being growing up, but in being able to meet myself where I was at back when I went through the trauma of having OCD, especially in the suicide realm and the hospitalization. I did a podcast with Kim Quinlan, and I said, the thing is, I've written the book, I've written the story, I tell the story all the time, but really haven't taken the opportunity to meet myself where I was at when I was 20.
Yeah.
And that's the work I'm doing now. And boy, trauma therapy is not easy because I continue to get pulled back into this feeling that I don't deserve to look at myself as someone who is traumatized. And I find this often when I'm working with people and doing peer support, is they look at their journey with, oh my gosh, I was talking to someone just recently, and they have been suffering with OCD for 20 something years, just now getting into symptom recovery, and I just don't see that that I have it as bad as someone that went through cancer or something else. I'm like, girl, come on now. Like, we're talking years and years of suffering, and I don't know why it is that we can't really see that reflection. I mean, I see it with the clients I work with. Yes. I'm like, oh my God, you've suffered so much. And then I look at myself and I'm like, you're being a wimp.
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think it comes with it, doesn't it? Like, someone will tell us your story and you think, wow, like, you're so brave. How do you live with like that? That's amazing that you manage it. And then when it comes to ourselves, it's kind of like, oh, maybe mine's not as bad as that person. And yeah, you get a lot of that kind of emotional backlash, I guess. Yeah.
It's the judgment piece that I'm really facing head on. And my mantra, I feel like with people, especially in peer support, is please try not to judge yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm judging myself all over the place lately. And so that's the work I'm doing now, which I think is important work. I just wasn't ready for it until now.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Thank you for sharing. And I guess kind of following on from that, what advice do you have for people who are kind of facing that, like the kind of additional emotions, I guess I put it, like on top of the anxiety, you get the shame and the guilt and kind of a bit of grief as well for a life that you thought you were going to kind of have. How do you kind of manage those emotions every day?
Well, I would say firstly, as silly as this sounds, if you're listening and and even if there's a waterfall of those emotions, the dam that feels like it's going to break, I want to give you, not that you need my permission, but sometimes you need somebody to say, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be pissed off. Like, we should all be pissed off that we have OCD. It sucks. Yeah. And it's okay to, to feel that shame, and the guilt. And I think that I hate to say advice, but I guess if I could make any suggestions in regards to it, it's just honor those emotions. They come and go in waves, but if you don't face them, they just continue to build like the dam that's going to break. Yeah. And so you aren't alone. All of us go through this emotional roller coaster when it comes to living with a mental illness. And so it may feel like you're alone, but you're not. And sometimes knowing that makes it easier to face the emotion. So my suggestion is embrace it. If you're mad, be mad. If you're sad, be sad. Just don't let those things get bottled up inside of you. Yeah. Or then you turn out like me 20 years later, not processing some of it, needing to go into trauma therapy.
Yeah. No, those are really good tips. I think people will benefit a lot from those, just kind of giving it space and allowing it to be there, like you say. Yeah. I guess we can sometimes feel a bit like we're kind of running when we're in therapy and we're getting better, and then we start doing like a bit of awareness and we're like, this is OCD, and you feel like you're running and you don't actually give those emotions kind of a chance to be there. And that, like, I think people need a process to kind of grieve, and sometimes more than once as well. So
because most of us are just surviving this illness. Yeah. And we think once the symptoms are gone, everything's going to be okay. Yeah. And aren't we all just on overdrive? When it's bad, you're just like, oh my God, get me through the day, get me through the week. When can I be better? Yeah. And so we don't even have time to process emotions when we're surviving. And so it's often afterwards when they all hit, when you think the black and white thinking of, oh, life is going to be so great when OCD is under control. Yeah. And then there's this whole other wave of anger and sadness and shame. And a lot of us just feel like, oh my gosh, when is it going to stop? Yeah. That's why I like to emphasize it's an important step in the process of recovery. Yeah. For me, there's two different types. There's symptom management and there's emotion management. Yeah. And the emotion almost just as hard as the symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. And just as important. Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. Thank you. So a new question now, a bit of a kind of twist, I guess, because I think this happens a lot to me and other people that I meet with. How do you go about, let's just say, I don't know, you meet someone and they say, what is OCD? But they've got a very kind of like stereotypical view of it. Like they think it's just about kind of keeping your house a bit tidy or stuff. How do you go about explaining OCD without kind of overloading them or overwhelming them with information?
Oh, well, my strategy is overloading them with information.
Okay, I love that. We all need a bit of that, I think.
So basically, in essence, I just talk the shit out of OCD so people won't ever say they're so OCD again.
Yes. I love that.
No, and to be honest with you, I used to, when at the beginning of my advocacy, I used to get really angry with people. I would get really fired up when I would see on the internet people making jokes about it, or I'm so, the OCD Christmas sweater or whatever that Target sweater is. Yeah. And I used to get really mad and want to go after and change the world when it
Yes.
came to that. And then I think that's a natural part of advocacy. I think you have to in some way get fired up to be able to be an effective advocate. But I did find after I got deeper into it and more experience that I've started to be able to kind of read people on whether or not they're really interested in knowing what OCD is.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And not. So am I going to waste my time talking to somebody who's really just going to be like, oh, I don't care what you said, I'm still OCD anyway. Or somebody that's going to say, well, if you can't laugh at yourself, then you're just a victim. I mean, I despise that more than anything. And especially when I'm just going to say it. And if people who are listening have OCD and you don't like what I have to say, I don't care. Or you can email me and I'll talk to you about it. But I cannot stand it when people say, well, I have OCD and I think that the memes are funny and I think that y'all just need to lighten up. It's just so counterintuitive. I mean, if someone thinks that an OCD meme isn't funny, I'm not going to look at them and go, well, you shouldn't think that's funny. And so it's important for us, if we're all people with OCD, we need to support one another and get on the same page. Not like create some sort of fighting in-house about someone thinks it's funny and I don't, so I'm wrong and they're right and I need to lighten up. No, I don't. And so I think there, it's such a loaded topic when it comes to trying to break down the stigma and explain to people what OCD is. So typically if I can read someone and I feel as if they really want to know, they really are interested. I usually just go straight into the violent, sexual, blasphemous, intrusive thoughts. And then they're either intrigued or they're no way. And then I'm like, okay, now, but most of the time people are interested and they go, wow, I didn't realize that was OCD, that this was OCD. And then I can go into how severely debilitating it is. And that's, you kind of like hook them and you go, and by the way, don't ever use OCD as an adjective again.
Okay.
And they won't.
That will stay with them, I think, forever.
I'm so open with it too. I think that's, I use the language all the time, every single day. And I'm talking about suicide here and pedophilia themed here, all this stuff. So it's, I forget sometimes that people are not desensitized to it like I am. So oftentimes I can read people's face when they're like, and I think, okay, well, now I've got them.
No, that's really cool. I think that's good. And I think it's something like people with OCD can kind of build up to. And thank you for kind of sharing as much as you do, because I think it gives those of us with OCD kind of a chance to share that with our kind of friends as well and say, I'm not ready to talk about it right now, but I want you to know what it is. So here's, some videos on it and stuff. And I think that's really cool. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, cool. A question that one of my friends asked me to kind of ask was, how can friends and family support people with OCD without giving reassurance or kind of wanting to distract them from their anxiety and obsessions?
This is a good question, and it's a hard one. When I do peer support, I often do it with individuals who have OCD, but I also do peer support with families or spouses. And this is solely to be able to communicate to somebody the impact that OCD has on an individual that can be shrouded in the stigma and the shame of living in a relationship and feeling less than. Now, let me explain that. That does not mean that anybody who has OCD is less than, but there is some sort of, I don't know, switch that gets flipped on when you're diagnosed with a mental illness, where all of a sudden you feel less than in the world, in your relationships, in your family, in your friendships, in everything. This, oh my gosh, if people knew, they may think differently of me. They may look at me. They may be afraid of me, especially when we're dealing with violent, sexual, intrusive thoughts or blasphemous thoughts that can go against like a long traditional family religious beliefs. We get terrified of, and it really is that internal and personal shame and stigma. So I always try to explain to families, look, this is not personal, but you've got to understand that even though you know this person and you've known them their entire lives, this is a real experience that they're having. And it's important to step back and listen to where they're coming from and believe them. So this is it seems like the easiest concept in the world, to just listen to someone and believe what they're going through. It is so difficult to do when you are entrenched in somebody's lives for so long, and all of a sudden they come up with this, by the way, the last 10 years I've been worried that I'm going to murder you, or, that I would, that I'm, going to turn into a pedophile or whatever else. There's that, and there's also the misunderstanding of how debilitating OCD is. I can tell somebody I have intrusive thoughts and they think, oh, she has fleeting thoughts once in a while. No, when I'm in that state of mind, it's 24/7, and I'm putting a face onto the world.
Yeah, totally.
And so being able to explain to, loved ones, spouses, look, this person is not being 100% honest. Because if they were, you would get tired of it, of hearing it every day, every single intrusive thought that comes up.
That's true. Yeah. So
one of the things that I try to do when I'm meeting with family is I try to explain all that to them from the sufferer's perspective, but I also I encourage them to sit down with the person and say, what do I say? What can I say that will encourage you and support you? What shouldn't I say? That will not encourage you and not support you. And it is important that if I communicate back to somebody, you know what, when you say that I'm annoying when I talk about intrusive thoughts, it bothers me. If I say that to somebody and then 2 days later I say something about an intrusive thought and they go, God, you're annoying. You're not respecting that. You're not respecting what the person has asked. So essentially you're not believing them. And what we really need as individuals with not just OCD, but mental illness in general, is we need people to believe that what we are experiencing is just pure suffering and torture. And so I really encourage people, when you are supporting somebody, find out what you can do, believe them, and make that part of your ability to support. I did a blog a long time ago. It's how to and how not to support somebody. And the biggest thing I wanted to drive home is that you've got to ask people what they need and not make it about you. Because we tend to, oh, how are you doing? Oh, you're not doing good. Oh, well, let me tell you how I felt, or I had it this. You don't make it about you. You make it about them. Supporting someone is, what do you need, not what do I need based on what you just told me.
No, that's a good point, I think, especially when you're telling someone who doesn't know you have OCD. And I think sometimes people, because they're trying to help and it's completely natural, but they'll say, oh, I do a few things like that, or I do that a little bit, and it can be so kind of infuriating, and you just don't feel like you've been listened to, and you don't feel kind of understood. When someone kind of responds with empathy and, kind of saying that must be really difficult for you, and like, I'm totally here, that's just a completely different reaction, I think.
Absolutely. Empathy is the key.
Yeah, definitely. Empathy is great. We all need a little bit more of that. A question I had was kind of what motivated you to start advocacy, and kind of what tips do you have for people who want to start advocacy for OCD or any mental health disorder?
Okay. The motivation to start advocacy was selfish. I felt very, very alone. I'd been living with OCD, violent, sexual, intrusive thoughts at that point. Oh gosh, 20 years. Or knowing I had OCD, I'd been living for like 13 years in silence. I had nobody around me. I knew they were out there, but I didn't know anybody. And I just thought, there gotta be people out there that's doing this. So I selfishly wanted to advocate so I could bring people to me and feel less alone. So, but I've told this story often in regards to starting advocacy. It really did kick off when I relapsed. I relapsed in 2011, and that was when the emotional recovery started. Before that, I hated myself. I hated looking in the mirror. I hated who I was. I hated who I thought that the disorder made me. And when I relapsed, there something clicked for me, and I said, this is not going away.
Yeah.
This I've got this for life. So I can either hate myself and hate my brain,
Yeah.
or I can really learn to love myself and or at least I couldn't envision myself loving myself at that point. But I was like, at least I could like myself and try to like my brain and see what happens, because this ain't working.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, what if I just started speaking out about it? Because the shame was what kept me quiet. And so I went to Toastmasters, which I don't know if y'all have that in the UK.
No, I don't know what that is.
It's like a speaking club here.
Oh, okay.
They have all different chapters in all these states and stuff.
Oh, cool.
And I just decided one day, okay, I'm going to become a public speaker. And I went to Toastmasters, learned how to speak, started doing speeches. I mean, seriously, it was just off the cuff. I'm just going to start doing this.
Wow.
And as I got more comfortable on stage, I just started revealing more and more about my struggle. Now, at the time, this was back in 2012.
Yeah.
There was nothing on the internet other than clinical articles.
Yeah.
You know, that mentioned pure OCD, violent sexual intrusive thoughts, but it wasn't anything relatable.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, well, maybe I'll start speaking out. And it just organically evolved into my very blunt YouTube videos. And the more I said out loud, the more people I could reach.
Yeah.
And so it felt like a community for me. And I thought, oh my gosh, if it feels like community for me, think about how all these other people feel.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's just evolved from there. I mean, it's bizarre how I've ended up where I am now doing peer support full time. So it's amazing. It's just a testament to, I remember standing in my bedroom, you know, in 2013. And I was like, in 5 years from now, you know, I'm going to be helping people with OCD. I had no clue how I was going to do it.
Yeah.
It's just a testament of the law of attraction. You know, you put things out there and they can happen if you really believe in them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, no, really good answer. That's really cool. I think that follows on quite nicely to next question. What can you tell us a little bit about your peer support that you do now and how people can kind of access that?
Yes. So peer support was kind of a natural next step for me after advocacy. I published my book. Well, actually, I did peer support before the book. When I really started getting into advocacy and I started working with Matthew Miles, he's a mental health or an OCD therapist here in Denver, and I was helping with some of his clients that were homebound. And he trained me on how to do coaching through ERP, and he supervised me. And then I would do peer support, which is sharing my lived experience of ERP to help support people while they're doing this. And then I decided to get proper trained on doing peer support. So I went through a program here in Denver. And I think in the back of my head, there was always this, well, I want to help people with OCD.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like there was any avenues to do that other than therapy. And I was not interested in being an OCD therapist.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's you can't share the story.
Yeah.
There's an ethical boundary of me being able to say, I've been there.
That's true.
And I really feel like with OCD, there is an absolute need.
Yeah.
Especially with the stigmatizing, alienating things. It's great when you go to a therapist and they go, yeah, I treat this and I understand that. But when you can talk to someone who's like, yes, I have worried, I want to have, that I'm attracted to my dad.
Yeah.
I'm worried I'm going to murder, my neighbor or whatever. Yeah. It's different. And so I did peer support a couple years in the state institution here, out in the community here, working with all kinds of illnesses, got great experience, great supervision. And then I went out on my own January 2017 because I just knew I wanted to work only with OCD.
Yeah.
And since then, I work full time from home. I usually work through Skype or FaceTime. And what it does for people, and this is the feedback I get, peer support was hugely helpful for me in my own recovery. Yeah. And it was kind of like I was saying earlier, just having someone who has been through the challenge of living with mental illness symptoms and getting to recovery, someone that said, hey, it's okay to be sad. I'm giving you permission to be pissed off or whatever you need to be. that's what peer support did for me. Really helped me accept everything that I was going through and show me that I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that that's what I give back to people is just the ability for someone if they're having a bad week or they're having a bad day or if they're having a good day or whatever, I meet with them and I can be there with them and just get it. I can meet them where they're at instead of, are you doing your ERP? And, we got to keep going up on the hierarchy, or you're feeling bad because you're not doing your therapy. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so I get to ride the waves with people.
Yeah.
And help them to know that they're not going to drown.
Yeah.
I'm walking with them or swimming with them or whatever, to stay with the analogy.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I do that in referral consultations full time. And I have, clientele I've been working with for over a year, and then some I just meet with once or maybe once every 3 or 4 months. But I'm just here for people when they need it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I think that's a really good service. And I think there's something really, really valuable in just talking to other people, like you say, that are kind of in recovery and are still on their journey and that just totally get it. I think, it's really awesome.
It normalizes it.
Totally.
It normalizes those themes that you think, I'm completely isolated.
Yeah.
Nobody, because you know how OCD is. OCD will tell you that you could have 99 of the symptoms listed on 100 list, and you're like, no, but I don't have this one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, I'm just that little bit different.
So is having someone who's been there and also knows how not to give into the compulsion.
Yes.
So not provide reassurance. I wrote this down the other day. Somebody called me the reassurance gatekeeper.
That's great.
Because I meet with them and I think that he thought, okay, well, she'll give me reassurance, this and that. And I'm like,
no, sorry.
It's important to know that and do that too. And that's why I say, when you're doing peer support, it's important to be trained, it's important to be credentialed and supervised. So I am supervised by an OCD therapist.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Yeah, no, thank you. A bit of a kind of different question to that. How do you, because I think this happens for me a lot, and I've heard you talk about it in some of your videos as well. How do you manage when the obsession of kind of what if this is not OCD turns up?
Oh, the dreaded what if it's not OCD.
Yeah.
I would say that, that's still, if I struggle with anything OCD related, still it's that. And I've just kind of accepted that that's just the way it's going to be for the rest of my life. So I'm actually okay with it.
Yeah.
But, and I think if people are listening and they don't really understand that, because they think we either have OCD or you don't. OCD is called the doubting disease for a reason.
Yeah.
It is just perpetual doubt about everything.
Yeah.
And so when someone, and I'm not comparing OCD themes, but when someone doesn't have outward compulsions or, not noticeable outward compulsions, it's really difficult to even know you're doing compulsions. So if I am stuck in the house, turning a faucet on and off, or sitting at a doorknob, or turning the stove, yes, I can actively see I'm doing compulsions. This must be OCD.
Yeah.
But, when I'm on Google for 4 hours with this urgency of needing to solve a problem, my brain doesn't go, oh, this might be OCD. My brain is like, this isn't OCD. This is a real crisis.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be on Google if it wasn't, which of course is the opposite. I am on Google because it is OCD.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do with this for myself and in supporting my clients who struggle with this is I have to recognize that OCD in my life is all about patterns. So now I will warn you that if you take this for what I'm saying, you might turn that into a compulsion.
Yeah.
So
be careful, everyone.
So don't start looking for the patterns and think it's going to all go away. Remember, there is no key to making OCD go away. So don't look for the key.
Yeah.
But what I do and what works for me is on a smaller scale, OCD always shows up the same way for in my behaviors, which is a pattern. I am always ruminating. I always Google.
Yeah.
I always mentally review. I get stuck. My face gets stuck like this.
Yeah.
I have that wrinkle above my I'm staring at the wall for an hour trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
I always do the same things. OCD changes. I don't. I always respond the same way. Why? Because it's triggering the same part of the brain every single time.
Yeah.
That's my natural response to it. So I have to I swear, even if I go, but this can't be OCD. And Sean David, my partner, he's like, but you've been in front of Google the last 5 hours, by the way. And I'm like, no, I haven't. I have to just trust. Okay, maybe this isn't OCD. Maybe it is, but it's not going to hurt to implement some ERP to see if it might help.
Yeah.
That's the smaller scale pattern. The grander scale pattern is this. I look at my life and the patterns of my life and my past. What triggers my OCD? Everybody always says, relapse is so awful. I'm like, whatever, relapse is an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
Be grateful for the relapse because you can see, okay, why did this happen? What's going on in my life? What month is it? For a lot of women, what time of the month is it?
Yeah.
And start to put the puzzle together every time you relapse. So when you're 20 years into recovery, it's boom, I'm going to, my grandmother's is in and out of hospice right now. So she's going to pass away soon. That is a trigger for me. Loss is a trigger for me. So I'm already ready, for the next few months, I'm ready for the intrusive thoughts. So when they show up, because it's part of my grander pattern, I will be able to confront it head on, even though I will be like, this really isn't OCD.
Yeah.
With OCD, you just have to trust. You just have to throw this blind trust out there and go, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm doing the work anyway.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think maybe is a really good word to use. That's become a massive part of my vocabulary, that's for sure. And my friends as well. I think they say that to me a lot. Maybe, maybe not. No.
Dr. Phillipson says it best. Take the risk, live with the uncertainty.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do with OCD. It goes against the grain.
Yeah.
And it's always going to go against the grain. People want to believe it's going to come natural. It does not come natural.
Yeah.
My recovery place is that pivotal moment in between the natural way of dealing with it, which is compulsions, or the choice that I make to not do them. That's where I live.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Yeah. No, thank you. What advice, because I heard you talk about this on, I think it was one of your recent Facebook live videos, because I sometimes find this as well, when you kind of feel, or people kind of feel like they can't connect with people, their friends or family, because they don't know their kind of full story, or they don't know the exact content of their OCD. What kind of advice do you have for those people that feel like that they can't connect?
Whew. Well, I don't have any advice, but I do feel the experience of that, and I would say that is really part of the whole grief process, is the loss and the lack of connection with others.
Yeah.
I felt this, I can kind of go back when I was living in my symptoms and I had no idea it was OCD. And so this was 12 years of intrusive thoughts and anxiety. And it was through my teenage years. I just remember the depth of sadness I felt and jealousy I felt for everybody around me, that all of these people have these connections. They have no idea how good they have it. And here I am, this frame of a person with a monster inside. And if people only knew, they wouldn't want anything to do with me. And that was part of my strategy of surviving OCD, was how grandiose of a person can I be? How many friends can I have? How many people can surround me to fill that void that I had that never filled it? But it was just whatever my attempt was in surviving it. And that was the depth. There was a depth of sadness in that, and grieving and I look back now and I just do not have fond memories at all of being a child, an adolescent, and a teenager because of that void, that just inability to connect there. I could connect to a certain place, and then it was, but if only they knew. In reality, I wasn't any different than anybody else.
Yeah.
I just had OCD, but I did not know that
Didn't
then.
know, yeah.
So, you know, if you're experiencing that, I mean, if you're experiencing that now, I don't think anybody would experience that now, because obviously if you're listening to the OCD stories, you know you have OCD.
Yeah.
But if you did experience it, I get it. Most of us get it. That is a really sad, desperate time of life before people are diagnosed correctly.
Yeah.
That's all I can say about that part, because it just is. The lack of connectedness later in life for me, probably just as devastating. When I was diagnosed and treated, my brain just shut down and said, I want nothing to do with OCD. Nobody will ever know through. I don't want anyone to know my intrusive thoughts. Or I'll never get married. I'll never get a job. I'll never, you know, so this is a farce. You know, it's not reality.
Yeah.
It feels like reality.
Yeah.
The same way intrusive
As it
thoughts
always
feel
does.
like reality.
Yeah.
But it's not true.
Yeah.
Yes, if you tell the wrong person, you know, it could be horrific. However, there are many, many, many people out there who are living with mental illness, who are living with OCD, that just get it.
Yeah.
Yes, I would choose wisely if you were telling people some of the heavy-handed themes that people aren't going to understand. And it still is okay to feel that sadness and to be sad that, yes, maybe my partner doesn't get it or my family just doesn't get it. That is sad. And that's, but I've said this 100 times. No support is better than toxic support.
Yeah.
Because if you are barking up the wrong tree for someone to understand and love you and connect with you, and they don't get it and they don't want to get it, or they think you're disgusting because you have these thoughts, no.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. We have enough shame. We don't need other people to shame us. You know, we that's the last thing we need. So, you know, as far as when I lived in that space for so long, yes, I was extraordinarily lonely. I felt, again, I could only go so far without telling someone. And then there was always the risk of telling someone and them really not understanding the severity of telling someone I attempted suicide and them going, you attempted suicide for OCD? Like, all it is hand washing. You know, that would be, the invalidation of that would have been too devastating for me. But at this point now, I think that where I've gotten to reconcile with that emptiness and kind of that hole of sadness that I had is, number one, surrounding myself with people that want to get it. And that meant going through a long period of time without anybody, by the way. And that was okay. I was okay with that. It was hard and it was lonely, but on the other side, finding people like you and Stu and, you know, my best friends who get it, who live with it, or they just choose to believe it. It's worth it. It's worth holding out. And again, not everybody's going to understand, but that doesn't mean that they don't still love you, or that they can't still be part of your life. But I put people in different categories of support. You know, if I need tough love, I go to one person. If I'm, you know, fishing for reassurance and I think there's suckers out there, I go to those people. But I also understand that there are people in my life that will never get OCD, but that doesn't mean I don't love them any less. It's the biggest challenge that we have is filling up that void on our own, because we have to love ourselves before anyone else can love us.
That's beautiful. Thank you for putting it like that. That really kind of resonated with me. That's awesome. How can, I don't know, I guess, you know, I think it's getting better in terms of awareness and mental health is being brought into places like schools and things. How can people kind of in society and, you know, people who work in schools kind of start raising awareness of OCD so that it can kind of get picked up earlier?
Oh my. What country are we talking about?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I guess, kind of, I don't know, the US and the UK are probably in similar kind of places. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Gosh, I don't know. And I really don't know the answer to that. And the reason why is because, just to be a little bit empathetic to teachers, gosh, they've got so many demands on them anyway. I would say there's nothing that I want more than curriculum to be in place in the 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and every single person going through.
Yeah.
Be able to say, here are all the mental illnesses.
Yeah.
Here are the symptoms. If you have these, this is where you go.
Yeah.
There's nothing I want more.
Yeah.
But over here in the States, I mean, teachers are more worried about whether or not someone's going to pull a gun out. And I mean, it's almost like, it's almost like it's too much to ask, even though we're all trying to push for it. I will say I've approached many schools, even like in the advocacy that I do, and schools are like, oh, what organization are you from? What are you going to say? We don't want to, there's still all the myths that if you talk about suicide, that means there's going to be the rash of suicide. So there's so many regulations up there, so much. So I hate to say that it's a losing battle, because it is not.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that I want more than for it to happen, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I think it's almost so overwhelming.
Yeah.
I do believe that teachers want to do it, but they don't know how to do it. And someone has to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
And that's going to be our leaders.
Yeah.
And we're lacking in leaders here in Colorado as far as mental health. They are not interested in mental health. So unfortunately it turns political, and it also has to do with money.
Yeah, no, I think certainly here in the UK it's starting to improve in terms of the government kind of recommending that mental health gets brought into some of the curriculum and stuff like that. So that's good. Yeah, that's a really positive change. So hopefully that will keep heading in the right direction.
I hope so. And if you're getting into advocacy, or if you're thinking, okay, I want to be part of a change, I want to do something, the best thing to do is go to in the States here, go to your local NAMI chapter, NAMI chapter, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Mental Health America, is that? I don't know. Go to your local chapters and see what they're doing, and see how you can get involved. Maybe they are going into the schools, even just more on the local, smaller level. Yeah. Or if you know teachers in your community, see if you can come talk to the class. Yeah. Usually I talk to classrooms if I have an in already, like if I know somebody, then they'll be like, oh yeah, come on in. But if I've approached several schools, and they're like, who are you? Yeah. And what are you going to say? And are you going to trigger everybody? Yeah. And so that's why it's difficult. And it is on a state by state basis here in the States, unfortunately, too.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, no, thanks.
I mean, the UK is like the size of Texas, right?
Yeah, that's true. I always forget how small we are over here. Oh dear. I guess sometimes I think OCD can feel really big, and you start, I think, especially after therapy, for a particular kind of, I don't know, theme or I don't know how to word it, but yes, like a particular group of obsessions, you might get therapy for that. And then it kind of starts to shift a little bit, and then it becomes it can become quite big, and you can realize that it has taken over lots of different areas of your life as your kind of awareness of it increases. And I think it can sometimes feel kind of overwhelming. So what, I guess, would you want to say to people who are kind of at that stage now?
Again, that is one of the many facets of the grief stage. It's that, and to go back to what I was saying before, it is, and I had this conversation with someone just recently, who was criticizing himself about when he was in his OCD symptoms, now that he's out of them. And I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah. Why are you judging what you did back then? And I made the comparison of, if you're 10 years out of a relationship where you got your heart completely broken, you're with somebody new, you got over it, and that's like looking back during that 6-month period where your heart was broken and been like, you fool, like, why were you heartbroken? If you can't revisit it like that, because you haven't healed from it. And so the grief period encompasses so much, and this is one of them. Exactly what you just asked. When you are surviving OCD, I emphasize surviving.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have the tools to manage OCD, you are literally just surviving it.
Yeah.
You're doing everything every day just to make it, just to get through, just to sleep, just to live sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You were doing what you were doing. Now, when you get symptoms under control and you start kind of like the fog's clearing a little, but then you're going, oh my gosh, OCD took over everything. And you start to think to yourself, like there's two parts to this. You start to think to yourself, oh my gosh, these behaviors, impeded on relationships, on work, on this, on that. That's when you're really in danger of judging yourself. And you're really in danger of those emotions getting so big that it feels overwhelming. The grief stage is one thing, OCD is another. OCD has nothing to do with emotions. It doesn't care about emotions. And, so keep pushing when you're there, and just keep pushing and try to keep the emotions separate when you're in therapy for it. Because yes, it is overwhelming, but it is only one part of the brain.
Yeah.
So keep pushing every day. But the other piece of that is this, and this is something I really have come to terms with in the last probably 5 years, is I really just thought, okay, I had the fear of vomiting, I had homosexual themed OCD, I had violent intrusive thoughts that I was going to murder people with my car, and relationship OCD, and that's it. There's no other OCD.
Yeah.
And in reality, OCD infiltrates anything in my life that has uncertainty. Yeah. It's easier to be aware of it when all of a sudden I'm having pedophile thoughts and I'm like, oh, that must be OCD.
Yeah.
It's easier then. But when I am, when I have uncertainty in, my relationship or uncertainty with a money situation or something, I find myself ruminating. Yeah. I find myself Googling, is that OCD, or is it just how my brain works because it malfunctions at that part? So coming to terms with, wow, I solve all of my problems with uncertainty the same way I solve the very irrational ones. Yeah. Made me feel really inadequate and really weak and stupid for a while. But then instead of looking at my brain as the enemy, I started to feel sorry for my brain and compassionate for my brain. It doesn't know it's broken. Yeah. It's just doing what it does. I'm the one that keeps fueling it. And so kind of coming to terms with that and just going, this is a lifelong illness. Yeah. It is my job to be mindful of when it's malfunctioning and how to help it know how to work correctly. Yeah. It was very no nonsense versus this whole, oh my gosh, poor me, or, it hits me all of a sudden, or, oh my God, whatever. Are there times in my life that I look back and I feel ashamed, or wow, I could have handled that better? Hell yes. But again, just like I was talking with that gentleman earlier, I am in no position to judge what I did when I was 25. Yeah. Or 15 for that matter. Yeah. I'm 41 right now. The only thing I can do is maintain and manage what goes on from here on forward.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I love what you said about kind of your brain doesn't know any different and it's just doing what it's kind of always done. So showing your brain some love as well as yourself. I think that's really cool. Yeah. Self-compassion. We could all do with a lot more self-compassion.
Yes.
How long have we got? Coming towards the end. So I think Stu always does a kind of 2 fun questions at the end. So I've put a bit of a twist on one of his ones. So you're in...
Is it the billboard one?
I haven't got that one actually. We could do that one. I did think about that one a lot actually, yeah. You'll recognize this one. So you're in an elevator and you meet someone who tells you their partner has OCD. What do you tell them?
Oh my. Well, okay, in all honesty, let me put myself in that situation. This is going to be awful, but I would be like, oh my God, really? What are they worried about? Do they think they're a pedophile or gay? get so excited when I find out that other people have OCD.
Yeah, no, I know.
Is that awful?
I do as well. No, I totally do. Let's just admit that now. I totally get excited when I find out someone has OCD. Yeah. Yeah, and then you feel like you can relate to them and have a proper conversation.
I mean, if I knew with 100% that they were serious about it versus, oh my partner has OCD because they need to line up their pencils on their desk.
Yeah, color code.
Then I would just be a jerk.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I would probably still be like, oh my God, do they have sexual intrusive thoughts or violent?
Shock them.
Are they suicidal? And the person would be like, what? Never mind.
I take it back.
I'll never mention OCD again. Good. Mission accomplished.
Goal achieved. Yeah, no, that's cool. And then the last kind of question is, if you think there's kind of one thing everyone with any kind of mental health diagnosis or who just wants to start building positive mental health, what should they kind of start doing or try doing?
In their own life?
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh my. It's
a hard question.
It is. Well, I'm trying to think what I did because that's really the only person I could speak for.
Yeah.
So I would say, I would like to say that I've been working toward positive mental health my whole life. Mm-hmm. But with every turn in recovery that I make, I always think, oh my gosh, I really didn't get it until now.
Yeah.
Which is the beautiful thing about the recovery journey is it doesn't end and you can keep growing as long as you're willing.
Yeah.
Which I am. I love growing. Sometimes it makes me feel like I've not grown a lot back in the day. But as far as positive mental health, I would say recently, and we talked about this at the beginning, the best thing that you can do is really honor your journey. And this is something that I thought that I had done and did it justice by, I'm going to write a book about it and I'm going to get it out there and I'm going to do advocacy. But what I was doing is validating everybody else's experience.
Yeah.
And refusing to validate my own. And I don't know if that was, I wasn't ready yet, or if it was a safety precaution because I just couldn't handle it yet, which probably is the case. It was way too emotional because once it did hit the emotions, I was finally in a place where I was ready. But if you haven't yet, validate your experience. We all think I'm different, or this person had it worse, or I wasn't really traumatized. Well, yes, you were. If you have a mental illness, you are traumatized. If you want to choose not to say that you are, that's fine too. If that's not a word you like to use, but mental health diagnosis, symptoms, experience is trauma. And so regardless of whether you want to do comparative mental illness, well, I don't have bipolar, or I don't have schizophrenia, or I don't have depression with this, so I'm not. I tell this story. This is a great story. It was one of the first people I'd ever worked with. And she was homebound and bathroom bound with OCD for many, many hours a day. And I'm sitting there supporting this woman, and she is wonderful. And I was way outside of my own experience with OCD, consider myself in recovery, and I'm supporting her. And I just saw how much she was struggling and how difficult she had it. And I was like, oh my gosh, she really has OCD bad. I don't have OCD this bad. And of course my brain went, well, maybe you really don't have OCD. And what if this and what if that? And I'm sitting there, and every time I met with her for a while, I would go, oh my gosh, what if I really don't have OCD and she has it so bad and I don't, and maybe I was just weak and that's why I attempted suicide. And so one day we started talking, and she said something like, she said, well, I just don't have OCD that bad. And I went, what? What? And she was like, I mean, I've never been hospitalized. You were hospitalized. So, I mean, you had it really bad. And I was like, oh my gosh.
You're both sitting there thinking the same thing.
That we're going with. And it just was such an eye-opener. And I told her, I was like, I've been sitting here worried that I didn't have it bad. And we were just dying laughing. It's just such a simple example of what we do in order to invalidate what we've been through. It is okay to turn the corner. It's okay to look in the mirror and say, my experience was traumatic. It hurt. It changed me. I wish I didn't have it. If that's how you feel, like, it's okay to feel this way, because I guarantee you a lot of people in your life aren't going to be able to validate it because they didn't experience it.
Yeah.
So it's important that you validate it for yourself. That is the first step in self-love. And so that was a long-winded answer to what can you do, to start improving your mental health, but it really does start with you. Yeah. It doesn't start with anybody else but you.
Yeah.
With that said, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
So I know that you're interested and have started doing some stuff with advocacy.
Yeah.
So do you have any questions in regards to for me, as far as advocacy? Like, because I know taking those first steps for advocacy is tough.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, oh my God, I'm going to come out center stage, or what is it going to be like, or whatever. What are some of your big concerns, and is there anything that I can do to help support you in that?
Oh, that's really cool. I guess the main fear is kind of like fear of judgment, and dealing with what people's reactions might be and what people will kind of think of you. Yeah, that's one thing I think I probably struggle with in terms of raising awareness of OCD. And I think something I'm trying to kind of teach myself is to not care as much about what people do think, and to kind of, love myself so that I don't need that kind of validation from other people. But yeah, I guess this is a bad answer to a question. I think questions I have about advocacy, I guess how to manage it, because I sometimes feel like I'm kind of running, so I'll do one thing and then you get that kind of adrenaline rush of like, oh yes, I did that, and I put that post on Instagram and that was really scary, now let me do another thing, and then you keep going, you just don't stop, and then it becomes like this massive thing, and all you think and talk about seems to be OCD. So I guess it's how to manage that. Although sometimes that's great.
So I'm going to comment on what you first said, and then I'll answer that in my own lived experience. As far as worrying about what other people are going to think, that takes a long time in advocacy. And for me, it never really dissipates. Obviously, I really don't care when it comes to a lot of this stuff, but I've just recently started speaking out about substance use, and it's a whole other ball game of fear. What are people going to think? Whatever. A rule of thumb that I've stuck to that maybe might be helpful for you is, if there is a room of 100 people and 99 people don't get it, but you save one person's life, is it worth it?
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
I always think that way. And I speak to like the Denver Sheriff's Department here. So trust me, like most of them are not, they don't care.
Yeah.
Not that they're bad, but they're like, this girl's a freak. But if there's one person in that room, then it's worth it to me. So something that maybe you can keep in mind, because if OCD is 1 in 40 people and you're doing advocacy to a big group of people, you're speaking to somebody, you just don't know who it is.
Yeah.
As far as the other question, what was that? Oh, not to do OCD all the time. This is a great question and a point. So if anybody's listening that's wanting to get into advocacy, advocacy does not happen overnight. And Stu could probably, absolutely agree with this, is a lot of people get in their head, I want to do advocacy, I'm going to give back. And then they're like, I'm going to do this huge platform or whatever. And then it doesn't take off. Yeah. Or you do it for 6 months and it's like, why am I only getting 2 likes? Or whatever. And all I want to do is put my soul out there and nobody cares. There's a few things. Number one, people are uncomfortable about mental health. It just is the way it is. You've got to build your base of people. It took me years to do it. And there were many times I thought, nobody cares, nobody's listening, what am I doing? But in that time, you get to find your voice and you get to find what you're good at and really hone your craft and how that is to reach people. So consider that. consider that a great opportunity to fail at times and not have a big audience.
Yeah.
Some things work, some things don't. And the beginning of advocacy is a great time to test those waters.
Yeah.
But it takes a while because people are scared to like mental health posts because they're scared if other people see it, they're going to think this or that, but you will build your base.
Yeah.
And other than that, if you are an advocate, you're going to be talking about mental health all the time. So get used to it.
Sometimes I do think that it's like, oh, I need to have a different conversation. Then it just goes straight back to it.
I know.
But that's awesome as well.
I used to think people are going to get bored with it or whatever, but then you just start surrounding yourself with advocates and people living with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of the closest people in my life are mentally ill.
Yeah.
And I love them.
Yeah. We're the best kind.
I know. Well, we're the most interesting.
Definitely. Oh, no, that's awesome advice. Thanks, Chrissie. I'll definitely take that on. And yeah, just thank you from kind of me and everyone else who kind of listens for doing all your videos that you do and your kind of coffee with Chrissie as well. That's really great. So thank you for doing all those things because it definitely is impacting on a lot of people's lives.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on here today. This was fun.
No, yeah, it was really great. Thank you for coming.
So, guys, I hope you really enjoyed that kind of fresh new angle on the podcast. Who knows if it will happen again, but I'm really glad I made it happen this time. And I hope you guys enjoyed Jess as an interviewer and her questions. And thank you to Chrissie for her time too. But disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It's not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. Until we speak, take care.